Chapter 2.7 How Pantagruel Came to Paris, and of the Choice Books of the Library of St. Victor. After that Pantagruel had studied very well at Orleans, he resolved to see the great university at Paris. But before his departure, he was informed that there was a huge big bell at St. Aignan in the said town of Orleans, under the ground, which had been there above 214 years. For it was so great that they could not by any device get it so much as above the ground, although they used all the means that are found in Vitruvius de Architectura, Albertus de Re Edificatoria, Euclid, Theon Archimedes, and Hero de Ingeniis, for all that was to no purpose. Wherefore, condescending heartily to the humble request of the citizens and inhabitants of the said town, he determined to remove it to the tower that was erected for it. With that he came to the place where it was, and lifted it out of the ground with his little finger as easily as you would have done a hawk's bell or bellwether's tingle-tangle. But before he would carry it to the foresaid tower or steeple appointed for it, he would needs make some music with it about the town, and ring it alongst all the streets as he carried it in his hand, wherewith all the people were very glad. But there happened one great inconveniency, for with carrying it so and ringing it about the streets, all the good Orleans wine turned instantly, waxed flat and was spoiled, which nobody there did perceive till the night following. For every man found himself so altered and adry with drinking these flat wines, that they did nothing but spit, and that as white as Malta cotton, saying, "We have of the Pantagruel, and our very throats are salted." This done, he came to Paris with his retinue. And at his entry, everyone came out to see him, as you know well enough that the people of Paris is sottish by nature. By be flat and be sharp, and beheld him with great astonishment, mixed with no less fear that he would carry away the palace into some other country, a remotes, and far from them, as his father formerly had done the great peal of bells at Our Lady's church to tie about his mare's neck. Now after he had stayed there a pretty space, and studied very well in all the 7 liberal arts, he said it was a good town to live in, but not to die. For that the grave-digging rogues of Saint Innocent used in frosty nights to warm their bums with dead men's bones. In his abode there, he found the library of St. Victor a very stately and magnific one, especially in some books which were there, of which followeth the repertory and catalogue, et primo. The For God's Sake of Salvation, the codpiece of the law, the slipshoe of the decretals, the pomegranate of vice, the clue bottom of theology, the duster or foxtail flap of preachers, composed by Turlupin, the churning ballock of the valiant, the henbane of the bishops, marmotretus de babunis et apis, cum commento dorbellis, decretum universitatis parisiensis, super gorgiacitate, mulircularum ad placidum. The apparition of Sanct Geltrude to a nun of Poissy, being in travail at the bringing forth of a child. Ars honest fartandi in societate, per Marcum Corvinum ortuinum. The mustard pot of penance, the gamashes, alias the boots of patience. Formicarium artium, de broderum usu, et honestate quartandi, per Silvestrum prioratum Jacobinum. The cozend or gulled in court, the frail of the scriveners, the marriage packet, the cruizy or crucible of contemplation, the flimflams of the law, the prickle of wine, the spur of cheese, rubofatorium, decrotatorium scalarium, tartaretus de modo cacandi, the bravades of Rome, bricot de differentiis browserum, the tailpiece cushion or close breech of discipline, the cobbled shoe of humility, the trivet of good thoughts, the kettle of magnanimity, the cavilling entanglements of confessors, the snatch fair of the curates, reverendi patris fratris Lubini, provincialis Bavardii, de gulpendis lardslitionibus libri tres, pesquilli doctoris marmore, de capriolis cum artichoke de comedendis, tempor papali ab ecclesia interdicto. The invention of the Holy Cross, personated by 6 wily priests. The spectacles of pilgrims bound for Rome. Majoris de modo, faciendi padinos. The bagpipe of the prelates. Bidet optimitate triporum. The complaint of the barristers upon the reformation of comfits. The furred cat of the solicitors and attorneys. Of peas and bacon, cum commento. The small veils, or drinking money of the indulgences. Preclarissimi, juris utriusque doctoris maester Pelodi, and C. Scrapfarthingi de Bachandis glossi, accursioni, trifles repetitio inusiti luculitissima. Strategmata, Francharchieri de Baniolet. Carl Bamkinis de Re Militari, cum figuris te voti. De usu et utilitate fleandi equos et equas, author magistro nostro de Quebecu. The sauciness of country stewards. 1000 N. Ros de Costagembedanus de Mustarda, post prandium servienda, libri quatuordecim, apostolati per 1000. Vorilanus. The covalage or wench tribute of promoters. Jabulnus de Cosmographia Purgatorii. Quistio subtilissima, utrum chimera in vacuo bonbonans possit, commedir secundas intentions, et fuit debatuta per decem hebdomadas in concilio constantiensi. The bridal champer of the advocates. Smuched lamenta scodi. The rasping and hard scraping of the cardinals. De calcaribus removendis, decades undecim per 1000. Albericum de risata. Ejustum de castramentandis, criminibus libri tres. The entrance of Anthony, de Leve into the territories of Brazil. Marfore, baccalarii cubentis rami, de pilandis aut unscanandis blurndis cardinalium mulis. The said author's apology against those who allege that the Pope's mule doth eat, but at set times. Prognosticatio qui incipit, Silvii triquabil, ballata per 1000 N, the deep dreaming gull Sion. Budarini, episcopi de emulgentiarum profdibus enids novum, cum prevalgio papali ad triennium et postia non. The shitabrana of the maids. The bald arse or peeled breech of the widows. The cowl or capouch of the monks. The mumbling devotion of the Celestine friars. The passage toll of beggarliness. The teeth chatter or gum ditter of lubberly lusks. The paring shovel of the theologues. The drench horn of the masters of arts. The scullions of Alcam, the uninitiated clerk. Magistri N. Lictichetes, de garbaliciftationibus horrorum canonicarum, libri quadraginta. Arsiversitatorium confraturum, inserto author. The gullscotany, or rasher of cormorants and ravenous feeders. The ramishness of the Spaniards, supergivuregandigated by Friar Inigo. The muttering of pitiful wretches. Dastardismus rerum idyllicarum, author magistro Bernigad. R. Lullius de Battis Foliges Principum. Calibistratorium Caffardii, author 1000. Jacobo hoc straiten heretica metra. Codtickler de Magistro Nostrandorum, Magistro Nostratorum Buvetis, Libri Octo Gallantissimi. The crackerids of ballasts or stone-throwing engines, contrapate clerks, scriveners, brief-writers, rapporters, and papal bull dispatchers lately compiled by Regis. A perpetual almanac for those that have the gout and the pox. Manera sui pandi fornacilos per mag. Exium. The shable or cimeter of merchants. The pleasures of the monachal life. The hodgepod of hypocrites. The history of the hobgoblins. The ragamuffinism of the pensionary maimed soldiers. The gulling fibs and counterfeit shows of commissaries. The litter of treasurers. The jugglingatorium of sophisters. Antiparacatametin aparbugidam ficribrations toward acantium. The periwinkle of ballad makers. The push forward of the alchemists. The nitty-naughty of the satchel-loaded seekers, by Friar Bindfestatis. The shackles of religion. The racket of swagwaggers. The leaning stock of old age. The muzzle of nobility. The ape's paternoster. The crickets and hawksbells of devotion. The pot of the emberweeks. The mortar of the politic life. The flap of the hermits. The riding hood or monterg of the penitentiaries. The trick-track of the knocking friars. Blockhidatus, de vita et honestate braggadocurum. Liripe sorbinus moralizations, per 1000. Lupoldum. The carrier horse bells of travelers. The bibbings of the tippling bishops. Dolaportians doctorum, coloniensium adversus ruclin. The symbols of ladies. The dungers martingale. Whirling friscorum, chase marcarorum per fratrum crackwood logdes. The clouded patches of a stout heart. The mummery of the racket-keeping robbing Goodfellows. Jerson de offerbilitate papi ob ecclesia. The catalogue of the nominated and graduated persons. Joe. Dita Brodii, terribilitate excommunicationis libellus acephalos. Ingeniositas invocandi diabolos et diabolas, per 1000. Gingolfum, the hodgepodge or gallimaufry of the perpetually begging friars. The Morris dance of the heretics. The whinings of Cajetan. Mudisnaut doctoris cherubis, de origin ruffutadorum et rankidorum ridibus, libri septum. 69 fat breviaries. The nightmare of the 5 orders of beggars. The skinnery of the new startups, extracted out of the phallobut, incornifestibulated, and plotted upon in the angelic sum. The raver and idle talker in cases of conscience. The fat belly of the presidents. The baffling flouter of the abbots. Sudoris adversus eum qui vocaverat eum slapsicitorum, et quod slapsicitors non sunt damnati ob ecclesia. Cacatorium medicorum. The chimney sweeper of astrology. Campi clisteriorum per paragraph 100. The bumsquibcracker of apothecaries. The kissbreach of chirurgery. Justinianus de Whiteliperodis tolendis. Antidotarium animi. Merlinus Coccius de patria diabolorum. The practice of iniquity, by Claron Sadden. The mirror of baseness, by Radnicu Waldenses. The ingrained rogue, by Dwarsencas Eldenu. The merciless cormorant, by Hoxenidno the Jew. Of which library some books are already printed, and the rest are now at the press in this noble city of Tübingen. Chapter 2.8. How Pantagruel, being at Paris, received letters from his father Gargantua, and the copy of them. Pantagruel studied very hard, as you may well conceive, and profited accordingly. For he had an excellent understanding and notable wit, together with a capacity in memory equal to the measure of 12 oil budgets or butts of olives. And, as he was there abiding one day, he received a letter from his father in manner as followeth. Most dear son, amongst the gifts, graces, and prerogatives, with which the sovereign plasmator God Almighty hath endowed and adorned human nature at the beginning, that seems to me most singular and excellent, by which we may in a mortal state attain to a kind of immortality, and in the course of this transitory life perpetuate our name and seed, which is done by a progeny issued from us in the lawful bonds of matrimony. Whereby that in some measure is restored unto us which was taken from us by the sin of our first parents, to whom it was said that, because they had not obeyed the commandment of God their Creator, they should die, and by death should be brought to naught that so stately frame and plasmature wherein the man at first had been created. But by this means of seminal propagation there, which continueth in the old copy, continueth in the children what was lost in the parents, and in the grandchildren that which perished in their fathers, and so successively until the day of the last judgment, when Jesus Christ shall have rendered up to God the Father his kingdom in a peaceable condition, out of all danger and contamination of sin. For then shall cease all generations and corruptions, and the elements leave off their continual transmutations, seeing the so much desired peace shall be attained unto and enjoyed, and that all things shall be brought to their end and period. And therefore, not without just and reasonable cause do I give thanks to God my Saviour and Preserver, for that he hath enabled me to see my bald old age reflowerish in thy youth. For when, at his good pleasure, who rules and governs all things, my soul shall leave this mortal habitation, I shall not account myself wholly to die, but to pass from one place unto another, considering that, in and by that, I continue in my visible image living in the world, visiting and conversing with people of honor and other my good friends, as I was wont to do. Which conversation of mine, although it was not without sin, because we are all of us trespassers, and therefore ought continually to beseech his divine majesty to blot our transgressions out of his memory, yet was it, by the help and grace of God, without all manner of reproach before men. Wherefore, if those qualities of the mind but shine in thee wherewith I am endowed, as in thee remaineth the perfect image of my body, thou wilt be esteemed by all men to be the perfect guardian and treasure of the immortality of our name. But if otherwise, I shall truly take but small pleasure to see it, considering that the lesser part of me, which is the body, would abide in thee, and the best, to wit, that which is the soul, and by which our name continues blessed amongst men, would be degenerate and abastardized. This I do not speak out of any distrust that I have of thy virtue, which I have heretofore already tried, but to encourage thee yet more earnestly to proceed from good to better. And that which I now write unto thee is not so much that thou shouldst live in this virtuous course, as that thou shouldst rejoice in so living and having lived, and cheer up thyself with the like resolution in time to come. To the prosecution and accomplishment of which enterprise and generous undertaking, thou mayst easily remember how that I have spared nothing, but have so helped thee, as if I had had no other treasure in this world, but to see thee once in my life completely well-bred and accomplished, as well in virtue, honesty, and valor, as in all liberal knowledge and civility, and so to leave thee after my death as a mirror representing the person of me thy father, and if not so excellent. And such indeed as I do wish thee, yet such in my desire. But although my deceased father of happy memory, Grangousier, had bent his best endeavors to make me profit in all perfection and political knowledge, and that my labor and study was fully correspondent to, yea, went beyond his desire, nevertheless, as thou mayest well understand, the time then was not so proper and fit for learning as it is at present, neither had I plenty of such good masters as thou hast had. For that time was darksome, obscured with clouds of ignorance, and savoring a little of the infelicity and calamity of the Goths, who had, wherever they set footing, destroyed all good literature, which in my age hath by the divine goodness been restored unto its former light and dignity, and that with such amendment and increase of the knowledge, that now hardly should I be admitted unto the first form of the little grammar schoolboys, I say, I, who in my youthful days was, and that justly, reputed the most learned of that age, which I do not speak in vain boasting, although I might lawfully do it in writing unto thee in verification, whereof thou hast the authority of Marcus Tullius in his book of old age, and the sentence of Plutarch in the book, entitled How a Man May Praise Himself Without Envy, but to give thee an emulous encouragement to strive yet further. Now is it that the minds of men are qualified with all manner of discipline, and the old sciences revived which for many ages were extinct. Now it is that the learned languages are to their pristine purity restored, viz., Greek, without which a man may be ashamed to account himself a scholar, Hebrew, Arabic, Chaldean, and Latin. Printing likewise is now in use, so elegant and so correct that better cannot be imagined, although it was found out but in my time by divine inspiration, as by a diabolical suggestion on the other side was the invention of ordnance. All the world is full of knowing men, of most learned schoolmasters and vast libraries, and it appears to me as a truth that neither in Plato's time, nor Cicero's, nor Papinian's, there was ever such conveniency for studying as we see at this day there is. Nor must any adventure henceforward to come in public, or present himself in company, that hath not been pretty well polished in the shop of Minerva. I see robbers, hangmen, freebooters, tapsters, ostlers, and such like, of the very rubbish of the people, more learned now than the doctors and preachers were in my time. What shall I say? The very women and children have aspired to this praise, and celestial manner of good learning. Yet so it is that, in the age I am now of, I have been constrained to learn the Greek tongue which, contemned not like Cato, but had not the leisure in my younger years to attend the study of it and take much delight in the reading of Plutarch's Morals, the pleasant dialogues of Plato, the monuments of Pausanias, and the antiquities of Athenaeus, in waiting on the hour wherein God my Creator shall call me and command me to depart from this earth and transitory pilgrimage. Wherefore, my son, I admonish thee to employ thy youth to profit as well as thou canst, both in thy studies and in virtue. Thou art at Paris, where the laudable examples of many brave men may stir up thy mind to gallant actions, and hast likewise for thy tutor and pedagogue the learned Epistemon, who by his lively and vocal documents may instruct thee in the arts and sciences. I intend, and will have it so, that thou learn the languages perfectly, first of all the Greek, as Quintilian will have it. Secondly, the Latin and then the Hebrew, for the Holy Scripture's sake, and then the Chaldee and Arabic likewise, and that thou frame thy style in Greek in imitation of Plato, and for the Latin after Cicero. Let there be no history, which thou shalt not have ready in thy memory, unto the prosecuting of which design, books of cosmography will be very conducible and help thee much. Of the liberal arts of geometry, arithmetic, and music, I gave thee some taste when thou wert yet little, and not above 5 or 6 years old. Proceed further in them, and learn the remainder if thou canst. As for astronomy, study all the rules thereof. Let pass, nevertheless, the divining and judicial astrology, and the art of Lullius, as being nothing else but plain abuses and vanities. As for the civil law, of that I would have thee to know the texts by heart, and then to confer them with philosophy. Now, in matter of the knowledge of the works of nature, I would have thee to study that exactly, and that so there be no sea, river, nor fountain, of which thou dost not know the fishes, all the fowls of the air, all the several kinds of shrubs and trees, whether in forests or orchards, all the sorts of herbs and flowers that grow upon the ground, all the various metals that are hid within the bowels of the earth, together with all the diversity of precious stones that are to be seen in the Orient and South parts of the world. Let nothing of all these be hidden from thee. Then fail not most carefully to peruse the books of the Greek, Arabian, and Latin physicians, not despising the Talmudists and Kabbalists, and by frequent anatomies get thee the perfect knowledge of the other world, called the microcosm, which is man. And at some hours of the day apply thy mind to the study of the Holy Scriptures, first in Greek, the New Testament with the epistles of the apostles, and then the Old Testament in Hebrew. In brief, let me see thee an abyss and bottomless pit of knowledge. For from henceforward, as thou growest great and becomest a man, thou must part from this tranquility and rest of study. Thou must learn chivalry, warfare, and the exercises of the field, the better thereby to defend my house and our friends, and to succor and protect them at all their needs against the invasion and assaults of evildoers. Furthermore, I will that very shortly thou try how much thou hast profited, which thou canst not better do than by maintaining publicly theses and conclusions in all arts against all persons whatsoever, and by haunting the company of learned men, both at Paris and otherwhere. But because, as the wise man Solomon saith, wisdom entereth not into a malicious mind, and that knowledge without conscience is but the ruin of the soul, it behoveth thee to serve, to love, to fear God, and on him to cast all thy thoughts and all thy hope, and by faith formed in charity to cleave unto him, so that thou mayst never be separated from him by thy sins. Suspect the abuses of the world. Set not thy heart upon vanity, for this life is transitory, but the word of the Lord endureth for ever. Be serviceable to all thy neighbors, and love them as thyself. Reverence thy preceptors. Shun the conversation of those whom thou desirest not to resemble, and receive not in vain the graces which God hath bestowed upon thee. And when thou shalt see that thou hast attained to all the knowledge that is to be acquired in that part, return unto me, that I may see thee and give thee my blessing before I die. My son, the peace and grace of our Lord be with thee. Amen. Thy father Gargantua. From Utopia, the 17th day of the month of March. These letters being received and read, Pantagruel plucked up his heart, took a fresh courage to him, and was inflamed with a desire to profit in his studies more than ever, so that if you had seen him, how he took pains, and how he advanced in learning, you would have said that the vivacity of his spirit amidst the books was like a great fire amongst dry wood, so active it was, vigorous and indefatigable. Chapter 2.9. How Pantagruel found Panurge, whom he loved all his lifetime. One day, as Pantagruel was taking a walk without the city, towards St. Anthony's Abbey, discoursing and philosophating with his own servants and some other scholars, he met with a young man of very comely stature, and surpassing handsome in all the lineaments of his body, but in several parts thereof most pitifully wounded. In such bad equipage in matter of his apparel, which was but tatters and rags, and every way so far out of order that he seemed to have been a fighting with mastiff dogs, from whose fury he had made an escape. Or to say better, he looked, in the condition wherein he then was, like an apple-gatherer of the country of Perche. As far off as Pantagruel saw him, he said to those that stood by, Do you see that man there, who is a-coming hither upon the road from Charenton Bridge? By my faith, he is only poor in fortune. For I may assure you that by his physiognomy it appeareth that nature hath extracted him from some rich and noble race, and that too much curiosity hath thrown him upon adventures which possibly have reduced him to this indigence, want, and penury. Now as he was just amongst them, Pantagruel said unto him, Let me entreat you, friend, that you may be pleased to stop here a little and answer me to that which I shall ask you, and I am confident you will not think your time ill bestowed. For I have an extreme desire, according to my ability, to give you some supply in this distress, wherein I see you are, because I do very much commiserate your case, which truly moves me to great pity. Therefore, my friend, tell me who you are, whence you come, whither you go, what you desire, and what your name is. The companion answered him in the German. The first edition reads Dutch tongue thus: Junker got jeb uch gluckend heil. Farwar, lieber Junker, ik las uch wissen, des de Eiher mich von fragt, ist ein arm und erbarmlich Ding, und werviel darvan zu sagen, welches uch verdrissig zu horen, und mir zu erzählen were, wie all die Poeten und Oratoren vorzeit haben gesagt in ihren Sprüchen und Sentenzen. Das die Gedächtnis des Elends und Armuth vorlängst erlitten ist ein Grosslust. My friend, said Pantagruel, I have no skill in that gibberish of yours. Therefore, if you would have us to understand you, speak to us in some other language. Then did the droll answer him thus: Albarildum gitfano, ditchmin brin, alabo dordio falbrath ringium albaris. Nin portsidikin almucatin milko, prin alelmin, en thoth dalheben ensuing, Cusim al dum al cadim nim, broth de choth porthmin mikais, im endoth. Prech dalmasolam hall moth danfrihim lupeldes in valdemoth. Nin her diavoth narbodim, dalgausch palfrapin, Dutch im scoth prech galeth dal chinon, min falcrich al canin brudithin doth dal prin. Do you understand none of this? Said Pantagruel to the company. I believe, said Epistemon, that this is the language of the Antipodes, and such a hard one that the devil himself knows not what to make of it. Then said Pantagruel, gossip, I know not if the walls do comprehend the meaning of your words, but none of us here doth so much as understand one syllable of them. Then said my blade again, Signor mio, voi vedit per esempio, ci la cornemusa non suona mai, esella non ha il venter pino. Cosi io parament non romansix sapre, canter la my fortune. Si prima il tribulato venter non ha la salita refection. Al qual e adviso chilamani, et li denti habiano perso, il loro ordi naturale, et del tutto eniscialati. To which Epistemon answered, as much of the one as of the other, and nothing of either. Then said Panurge, Lord, if you be so virtuous of intelligence as you be naturally relieved to the body, you should have pity of me. For nature hath made us equal, but fortune hath some exalted and others deprived. Nevertheless is virtue often deprived, and the virtuous men despised, for before the last end none is good. The following is the passage as it stands in the first edition. Urquhart seems to have rendered Rabelais in different English into worse Scotch, and this, with probably the use of contractions in his MS, or the oddness of handwriting which he owns to in his Logopendictation, p. 419 mate. Club edit has led to a chaotic jumble, which it is nearly impossible to reduce to order. Instead of any attempt to do so, it is here given verbatim. Lard gesthal besua virtuous intelligence. Assi body scalbus natural relath kalb sold osmi petty have. For nader has vis equally made bot fortune, some exadi hes and dois deprevit. Non yilis ivis mu virtius deprevit, and virtuous men decrevis for anin ye ladenus non quid. Here is a morsel for critical ingenuity to fix its teeth in 1,000. Yet less, said Pantagruel. Then said my jolly Panurge, Jonah andi guasa gausi, etten beharda remedio, behard versella iserlanda. Anbat ease auta y nasu, I nesishust gure proposition ordin den. Non asina beta fashiria, egabe gen heresi badia, sadashunura asia. Aaron hondavan, gualda sidashunadashuna. Estu ausik for example vinin souri, heen darstura egai harm. Genicoa placer vadu, are you there said Eudaemon Genicoa. To this said Carpalim, Saint Trinian's rammer unstitch your bum, for I had almost understood it. Then answered Panurge, Prust frest frins sorgdmend, strokti drhds pag br lelling, gravat chavigni pomardier rust picaldrek, divinier pries nays. Coil calmuch monac drup del muplist rink, drlnd dodalb up drentlock mink, stz rink jald divins dares cordelis bur joxt st zampanards. Do you speak Christian, said Epistemon, or the buffoon language, otherwise called Patelinois? Nay, it is the puzzlatory tongue, said another, which some call lanternois. Then said Panurge, Here, ik en spreek anders geen taal dan kursentaal. My dunkt notens, al en seg ik uniet eenwort, meinen newt verklert genog wat ik begeer. Gieft my eit bermhertigheid jets waar van ik jevot mogzin. To which answered Pantagruel, as much of that. Then said Panurge, Sener, de tanto habler yo soy cansado, porque suplico a vuestra reverencia quemire a los preceptos evangelicos, para los moven vuestra reverencia a lo quais de consciencia. Y si ellos non bastaren, para maur vuestra reverencia pedid, yo suplico quemire a la pedid natural, la qual yo creo, que la movera como es de razon. Y con eso non digo más. Truly, my friend, said Pantagruel, I doubt not but you can speak divers languages, but tell us that which you would have us to do for you in some tongue which you conceive we may understand. Then said the companion, Min her, endog ig med in gen tunge talid, leid some bairn, och uskalij creatora. Mein kleedeben och mit legums madrid udwiser alijul klarlig, huad ting mig best behof joris, som sandalig mad och drick. Hure for forbarm dig off your mig, och befal at giu mig nogget, af huelkit ig cand slyer min juindies mage, Lydra is so mand cerbero ensipe for setter. Sa skalt du lefu linge och lixelig. I think really, said Eusthenes, that the Goths spoke thus of old, and that, if it pleased God, we would all of us speak so with our tales. Then again said Panurge, Adon, scalum lecha, im iskar harab hal hebdika by mehura thithen lai kikar lehem, chanchet ubla al adonai cho nen ral. To which answered Epistemon, At this time have I understood him very well, for it is the Hebrew tongue most rhetorically pronounced. Then again said the gallant, Despota tinnen panagaeth, dietissimi aucardodotes. Horsgar limo analis commenen eme athlian, ki en temetixai mi auk alays audamos, zetis deparimu ha okri. Ki homos philology, pants homologousi tot logos t ki ramata parada hyparkin, hopot pragma aftopassi delon esti. Entha gar aninque monon logi isin, hina pragmata, hun piri amphisbetomen, mi prosphoros epiphenete. What? Said Carpalim, Pantagruel's footman, it is Greek, I have understood him. And how? Hast thou dwelt any while in Greece? Then said the droll again. Agonu don't auses vus distagnas algaru. Nu den feruzamist vus mariston ulbru, Fausks vaubral tant, bredegs mupretin dengelhaust dags non cropes, fost pardonoflist naugru. Agopaston tal nalprases hourtu los echitinus, prudauquis brawl pani guden bascru naudis caguans galfrin gaul austeropasu. In this and the preceding speeches of Panurge, the Paris Variorum edition of 1823 has been followed in correcting Urquhart's text, which is full of inaccuracies 1,000. Methinks I understand him, said Pantagruel. For either it is the language of my country of Utopia, or sounds very like it. And as he was about to have begun some purpose, the companion said, Jam todes vos per sacra, perc dios disc omnes obtestatus sum, ut si qui vos pietas permovit, egestatum meme soler mini, nec hilum proficio clamens et ejulens. Sinite quiso, sinite virium pae, quomi fata vocin aber, nec ultra vanis vestris interpellationibus obtendatis, memors veteris alias adagiae, quo venter famlicus auriculis cara dicitor. Well, my friend, said Pantagruel, but cannot you speak French? That I can do, sir. Very well, said the companion, God be thanked. It is my natural language and mother tongue, for I was born and bred in my younger years in the garden of France, to wit, Touraine. Then, said Pantagruel, tell us what is your name, and from whence you are come. For, by my faith, I have already stamped in my mind such a deep impression of love towards you, that, if you will condescend unto my will, you shall not depart out of my company, and you and I shall make up another couple of friends such as Aeneas and Acades were. Sir, said the companion, my true and proper Christian name is Panurge, and now I come out of Turkey, to which country I was carried away prisoner at that time when they went to Medellin with a mischief. And willingly would I relate unto you my fortunes, which are more wonderful than those of Ulysses were. But, seeing that it pleaseth you to retain me with you, I most heartily accept of the offer, protesting never to leave you should you go to all the devils in hell. We shall have therefore more leisure at another time, and a fitter opportunity wherein to report them. For at this present I am in a very urgent necessity to feed. My teeth are sharp, my belly empty, my throat dry, and my stomach fierce and burning, all is ready. If you will but set me to work, it will be as good as a balsamum for sore eyes to see me gulch and rave in it. For God's sake, give order for it. Then Pantagruel commanded that they should carry him home and provide him good store of victuals, which being done, he ate very well that evening, and, capon-like, went early to bed, then slept until dinner-time the next day, so that he made but 3 steps and 1 leap from the bed to the board. Chapter 2.1. How Pantagruel judged so equitably of a controversy, which was wonderfully obscure and difficult, that, by reason of his just decree therein, he was reputed to have a most admirable judgment. Pantagruel, very well remembering his father's letter and admonitions, would one day make trial of his knowledge. Thereupon, in all the carrefours, that is, throughout all the 4 quarters, streets, and corners of the city, he set up conclusions to the number of 9,764, in all manner of learning, touching in them the hardest doubts that are in any science. And first of all, in the Fodder Street, he held dispute against all the regents or fellows of colleges, artists or masters of arts and orators, and did so gallantly that he overthrew them and set them all upon their tails. He went afterwards to the Sorbonne, where he maintained argument against all the theologians or divines, for the space of 6 weeks, from 4 o'clock in the morning until 6 in the evening, except an interval of 2 hours to refresh themselves and take their repast. And at this were present the greatest part of the lords of the court, the masters of requests, presidents, councillors, those of the accompts, secretaries, advocates, and others, as also the sheriffs of the said town, with the physicians and professors of the canon law. Amongst which it is to be remarked that the greatest part were stubborn jades, and in their opinions obstinate. But he took such course with them that, for all their ergos and fallacies, he put their backs to the wall, gravelled them in the deepest questions, and made it visibly appear to the world that, compared to him, they were but monkeys and a knot of muffled calves. Whereupon everybody began to keep a bustling noise and talk of his so marvellous knowledge, through all degrees of persons of both sexes, even to the very laundresses, brokers, roast-meat sellers, penknife makers, and others, who, when he passed along in the street, would say, "This is he." In which he took delight, as Demosthenes, the prince of Greek orators, did, when an old crouching wife, pointing at him with her fingers, said, "That is the man." Now at this same very time there was a process or suit in law depending in court between 2 great lords, of which one was called my lord Kissbreech, plaintiff of one side, and the other my lord Suckfist, defendant of the other, whose controversy was so high and difficult in law that the court of Parliament could make nothing of it. And therefore, by the commandment of the king, there were assembled 4 of the greatest and most learned of all the parliaments of France, together with the great council, and all the principal regents of the universities, not only of France, but of England also and Italy, such as Jason, Philippus Decius, Petrus de Petronibus, and a rabble of other old rabbinists, who being thus met together, after they had thereupon consulted for the space of 46 weeks, finding that they could not fasten their teeth in it, nor with such clearness understand the case, as that they might in any manner of way be able to write it, or take up the difference betwixt the 2 aforesaid parties, it did so grievously vex them that they most villainously conshit themselves for shame. In this great extremity one amongst them, named Dudowhit, the learnedest of all, and more expert and prudent than any of the rest, whilst one day they were thus at their wits' end, all to be dunced and filigrobalized in their brains, said unto them, "We have been here, my masters, a good long space, without doing anything else than trifle away both our time and money, and can nevertheless find neither brim nor bottom in this matter, for the more we study about it the less we understand therein, which is a great shame and disgrace to us, and a heavy burden to our consciences, yea, such that in my opinion we shall not rid ourselves of it without dishonor, unless we take some other course, for we do nothing but dote in our consultations. See therefore what I have thought upon. You have heard much talking of that worthy personage named Master Pantagruel, who hath been found to be learned above the capacity of this present age, by the proofs he gave in those great disputations which he held publicly against all men. My opinion is, that we send for him to confer with him about this business. For never any man will encompass the bringing of it to an end, if he do it not. Hereunto all the counselors and doctors willingly agreed, and according to that their result having instantly sent for him, they entreated him to be pleased to canvass the process and sift it thoroughly, that, after a deep search and narrow examination of all the points thereof, he might forthwith make the report unto them, such as he shall think good in true and legal knowledge. To this effect they delivered into his hands the bags wherein were the writs and pancarts concerning that suit, which for bulk and weight were almost enough to lade 4 great kuya or stoned asses. But Pantagruel said unto them, Are the 2 lords between whom this debate and process is yet living? It was answered him, Yes. To what a devil, then, said he, serve so many paltry heaps and bundles of papers and copies which you give me? Is it not better to hear their controversy from their own mouths whilst they are face to face before us, than to read these vile fopperies, which are nothing but trumperies, deceits, diabolical cozenages of Sepola, pernicious slights and subversions of equity? For I am sure that you, and all those through whose hands this process has passed, have by your devices added what you could to it pro et contra in such sort that, although their difference perhaps was clear and easy enough to determine at first, you have obscured it and made it more intricate by the frivolous, sottish, unreasonable, and foolish reasons and opinions of Accursius, Baldus, Bartalus, De Castro, Duemola, Hippolytus, Panormo, Berdichin, Alexander, Curtius, and those other old mastiffs, who never understood the least law of the Pandects, they being but mere blockheads and great tithe calves, ignorant of all that which was needful for the understanding of the laws. For, as it is most certain, they had not the knowledge either of the Greek or Latin tongue, but only of the Gothic and barbarian. The laws, nevertheless, were first taken from the Greeks, according to the testimony of Ulpian, 50. Poster. De origin juris, which we likewise may perceive by that all the laws are full of Greek words and sentences. And then we find that they are reduced into a Latin style, the most elegant and ornate that whole language is able to afford, without excepting that of any that ever wrote therein, nay, not of Sallust, Varro, Cicero, Seneca, Titus Livius, nor Quintilian. How then could these old dotards be able to understand or write the text of the laws, who never in their time had looked upon a good Latin book, as doth evidently enough appear by the rudeness of their style, which is fitter for a chimney sweeper, or for a cook or a scullion, than for a jurisconsult and doctor in the laws? Furthermore, seeing the laws are excerpted out of the middle of moral and natural philosophy, how should these fools have understood it, that have, by G, studied less in philosophy than my mule? In respect of human learning, and the knowledge of antiquities and history, they were truly laden with those faculties, as a toad is with feathers. And yet of all this, the laws are so full that without it they cannot be understood, as I intend more fully to show unto you in a peculiar treatise, which on that purpose am about to publish. Therefore, if you will that I take any meddling in this process, first cause all these papers to be burnt. Secondly, make the 2 gentlemen come personally before me, and afterwards, when I shall have heard them, I will tell you my opinion freely without any feignedness or dissimulation whatsoever. Some amongst them did contradict this motion, as you know that in all companies there are more fools than wise men, and that the greater part always surmounts the better, as saith Titus Livius in speaking of the Carthaginians. But the foresaid Dudowhit held the contrary opinion, maintaining that Pantagruel had said well, and what was right in affirming that these records, bills of inquest, replies, rejoinders, exceptions, depositions, and other such diableries of truth-entangling writs, were but engines wherewith to overthrow justice and unnecessarily to prolong such suits as did depend before them. And that, therefore, the devil would carry them all away to hell if they did not take another course, and proceeded not in times coming according to the prescripts of evangelical and philosophical equity. In fine, all the papers were burnt, and the 2 gentlemen summoned and personally convented. At whose appearance before the court Pantagruel said unto them, Are you they that have this great difference betwixt you? Yes, my lord, said they. Which of you, said Pantagruel, is the plaintiff? It is I, said my lord Kissbreech. Go to then, my friend, said he, and relate your matter unto me from point to point, according to the real truth, or else, by cock's body, If I find you to lie so much as in one word, I will make you shorter by the head, and take it from off your shoulders to show others by your example that in justice and judgment men ought to speak nothing but the truth. Therefore take heed, you do not add nor impair anything in the narration of your case. Begin. Chapter 2.11. How the lords of Kissbreach and Suckfist did plead before Pantagruel without an attorney. Then began Kissbreach in manner as followeth. My lord, it is true that a good woman of my house carried eggs to the market to sell. Be covered, Kissbreach, said Pantagruel. Thanks to you, my lord, said the Lord Kissbreach, but to the purpose. There passed betwixt the two tropics the sum of threepence towards the zenith and a halfpenny, forasmuch as the Riphean mountains had been that year oppressed with a great sterility of counterfeit gudgeons and shows without substance, by means of the babbling tattle and fond fibs seditiously raised between the gibble-gabblers and accursian gibberish-mongers for the rebellion of the Switzers, who had assembled themselves to the full number of the Bumbies and Myrmidons to go a hansel getting on the first day of the new year, at that very time when they give brewies to the oxen and deliver the key of the coals to the country girls for serving in of the oats to the dogs. All the night long they did nothing else, keeping their hands still upon the pot, but dispatch, both on foot and horseback, leaden-sealed writs or letters, to wit, papal commissions commonly called bulls, to stop the boats. For the tailors and seamsters would have made of the stolen shreds and clippings a goodly sagbut to cover the face of the ocean, which then was great with child of a potful of cabbage, according to the opinion of the hay-bundle makers. But the physicians said that by the urine they could discern no manifest sign of the bustard's pace, nor how to eat double-tongued mattocks with mustard, unless the lords and gentlemen of the court should be pleased to give by Mall express command to the pox not to run about any longer in gleaning up of coppersmiths and tinkers. For the jobberknolls had already a pretty good beginning in their dance of the British jig called the estrandor, to a perfect diapason, with one foot in the fire, and their head in the middle, as Goodman Raggett was wont to say. Ha, my masters, God moderates all things, and disposeth of them at his pleasure, so that against unlucky fortune a carter broke his frisking whip, which was all the wind instrument he had. This was done at his return from the little paltry town, even then when Master Antitus of Cresplots was licentiated, and had passed his degrees in all dullery and blockishness, according to this sentence of the canonists, beady dunces, quoniam ipsi stumblaverunt. But that which makes Lent to be so high, by Saint Fiacre of Bry, is for nothing else but that the Pentecost never comes but to my cost, yet, on afore there, ho. A little rain stills a great wind, and we must think so, seeing that the sergeant hath propounded the matter so far above my reach, that the clerks and secondaries could not with the benefit thereof lick their fingers, feathered with ganders, so orbicularly as they were wont in other things to do. And we do manifestly see that everyone acknowledgeth himself to be in the error, wherewith another hath been charged, reserving only those cases whereby we are obliged to take an ocular inspection in a perspective glass of these things, towards the place in the chimney, where hangeth the sign of the wine of 40 girths, which have been always accounted very necessary for the number of 20 panels and pack saddles of the bankrupt protectionaries of 5 years' respite. Howsoever, at least, he that would not let fly the fowl before the cheesecakes ought in law to have discovered his reason why not, for the memory is often lost with a wayward shoeing. Well, God keep Theobald Mitting from all danger. Then said Pantagruel, hold there. Ho, my friend, soft and fair, speak at leisure and soberly without putting yourself in choler. I understand the case, go on. Now then, my lord, said Kissbreach, the foresaid good woman saying her gaudes and outy nose, could not cover herself with a treacherous backblow, ascending by the wounds and passions of the privileges of the universities, unless by the virtue of a warming pan she had angelically fomented every part of her body in covering them with a hedge of garden beds. Then giving in a swift, unavoidable thrust, very near to the place where they sell the old rags, whereof the painters of Flanders make great use when they are about neatly to clap on shoes on grasshoppers, locusts, sigils, and such like flyfowls. So strange to us that I am wonderfully astonished why the world doth not lay, seeing it is so good to hatch. Here the Lord of Suckfist would have interrupted him and spoken somewhat, Whereupon Pantagruel said unto him, Sint. By Saint Anthony's belly, doth it become thee to speak without command? I sweat here with the extremity of labor and exceeding toil, I take to understand the proceeding of your mutual difference, and yet thou comest to trouble and disquiet me. Peace in the devil's name, peace. Thou shalt be permitted to speak thy belliful when this man hath done, and no sooner. Go on, said he to Kissbreech, speak calmly, and do not overheat yourself with too much haste. I perceiving then, said Kissbreech, that the pragmatical sanction did make no mention of it, and that the holy Pope to everyone gave liberty to fart at his own ease, if that the blankets had no streaks wherein the lyres were to be crossed with a ruffian-like crew, and, the rainbow being newly sharpened at Milan to bring forth larks, gave his full consent that the good woman should tread down the heel of the hip-gut pangs, by virtue of a solemn protestation put in by the little testiculated or codsted fishes, which, to tell the truth, were at that time very necessary for understanding the syntax and construction of old boots. Therefore John Calf, her cousin Gervise once removed with a log from the woodstack, very seriously advised her not to put herself into the hazard of quagswagging in the lee, to be scoured with a buck of linen clothes till first she had kindled the paper. This counsel she laid hold on, because he desired her to take nothing and throw out, for non depont vadit, qui cum sapientia cadit. Matters thus standing, seeing the masters of the chamber of accomps or members of that committee did not fully agree amongst themselves in casting up the number of the almany whistles, whereof were framed those spectacles for princes which have been lately printed at Antwerp, I must needs think that it makes a bad return of the writ, and that the adverse party is not to be believed, in sacer verbo dotes. For that, having a great desire to obey the pleasure of the king, I armed myself from toe to top with belly furniture, of the soles of good venison pasties, to go see how my grape-gatherers and vintagers had pinked and cut full of small holes their high-coped caps, to lecher it the better, and play at in and in. And indeed the time was very dangerous in coming from the fair, in so far that many trained bowmen were cast at the muster and quite rejected, although the chimney-tops were high enough, according to the proportion of the windgalls in the legs of horses, or of the malanders, which in the esteem of expert farriers is no better disease, or else the story of Ranapatifam or Lamabodichin, interpreted by some to be the tale of a tub or of a roasted horse, savors of apocrypha, and is not an authentic history. And by this means there was that year great abundance, throughout all the country of Artois, of tawny buzzing beetles, to the no small profit of the gentlemen great-stick faggot carriers, when they did eat without disdaining the cocklecranes, till their belly was like to crack with it again. As for my own part, such is my Christian charity towards my neighbors, that I could wish from my heart everyone had as good a voice. It would make us play the better at the tennis and the balloon. And truly, my lord, to express the real truth without dissimulation, I cannot but say that those petty subtle devices which are found out in the etymologizing of patents would descend more easily into the river of Seine, to serve for ever at the miller's bridge upon the said water, as it was heretofore decreed by the King of the Canarians, according to the sentence or judgment given thereupon, which is to be seen in the registry and records within the clerk's office of this house. And therefore, my lord, I do most humbly require that by your lordship there may be said and declared upon the case what is reasonable, with costs, damages, and interests. Then said Pantagruel, my friend, is this all you have to say? Kissbreech answered, Yes, my lord, for I have told all the 2 autumn, and have not varied at all upon mine honor in so much as one single word. You then, said Pantagruel, my lord of Suckfist, say what you will and be brief without omitting, nevertheless, anything that may serve to the purpose. Chapter 2.12. How the Lord of Suckfist pleaded before Pantagruel. Then began the Lord Suckfist in manner as followeth. My lord, and you my masters, if the iniquity of men were as easily seen in categorical judgment as we can discern flies in a milk-pot, the world's 4 oxen had not been so eaten up with rats, nor had so many ears upon the earth been nibbled away so scurvily. For although all that my adversary hath spoken be of a very soft and downy truth, in so much as concerns the letter and history of the factum, yet nevertheless the crafty sleights, cunning subtleties, sly cozenages, and little troubling entanglements are hid under the rose-pot, the common cloak and cover of all fraudulent deceits. Should I endure that, when I am eating my pottage equal with the best, and that without either thinking or speaking any manner of ill, they rudely come to vex, trouble, and perplex my brains with that antique proverb which saith, who in his pottage-eating drinks will not, when he is dead and buried, see one jot. And, good lady, how many great captains have we seen in the day of battle, when in open field the sacrament was distributed in luncheons of the sanctified bread of the confraternity, the more honestly to nod their heads, play on the lute, and crack with their tails, to make pretty little platform leaps in keeping level by the ground. But now the world is unshackled from the corners of the packs of Leicester. One flies out lewdly and becomes debauched. Another, likewise 5, 4, and 2, and that at such random that, if the court take not some course therein, it will make as bad a season in matter of gleaning this year as ever it made, or it will make goblets. If any poor creature go to the stoves to illuminate his muzzle with a cowsherd or to buy winter boots, and that the sergeants passing by, or those of the watch, happen to receive the decoction of a clyster, or the fecal matter of a close stool, upon their rustling wrangling clutter-keeping masterships, should any because of that make bold to clip the shillings and testers and fry the wooden dishes. Sometimes, when we think one thing, God does another, and when the sun is wholly set all beasts are in the shade. Let me never be believed again, if I do not gallantly prove it by several people who have seen the light of the day. In the year 30 buying a Dutch curtail, which was a middle-sized horse, both high and short, of a wool good enough and dyed in grain, as the goldsmiths assured me, although the notary put an NC. In it, I told really that I was not a clerk of so much learning as to snatch at the moon with my teeth. But as for the butterfirkin where Vulcanian deeds and evidences were sealed, the rumor was, and the report thereof went current, that salt beef will make one find the way to the wine without a candle, though it were hid in the bottom of a collier's sack, and that with his drawers on he were mounted on a barbed horse furnished with a fronstal, and such arms, thighs, and leg pieces as are requisite for the well frying and broiling of a swaggering sauciness. Here is a sheep's head, and it is well they make a proverb of this, that it is good to see black cows in burnt wood when one attains to the enjoyment of his love. I had a consultation upon this point with my masters the clerks, who for resolution concluded in Frisomorum that there is nothing like to mowing in the summer, and sweeping clean away in water, well garnished with paper, ink, pens, and penknives, of Leon upon the river of Rhone, Dollopim Dollopoff, Terrabin Tarabas, Tut, Prout, Pish. For incontinently after that armor begins to smell of garlic, the rust will go near to eat the liver, not of him that wears it, and then do they nothing else but withstand others' courses, and rhynikedly set up their bristles, gainst one another, in lightly passing over their afternoon's sleep. And this is that which maketh salt so dear. My lords, believe not when the said good woman had with birdlime caught the shoveler foul, the better before a sergeant's witness to deliver the younger son's portion to him, that the sheep's pluck or hog's haslet did dodge and shrink back in the usurer's purses, or that there could be anything better to preserve one from the cannibals than to take a rope of onions, knit with 300 turnips, and a little of a calf's chaldron of the best allay that the alchemists have provided, and that they daub and do over with clay, as also calcinate and burn to dust these pantofles, muff and muff out, mouflin mouflard, with the fine sauce of the juice of the rabble rout, whilst they hide themselves in some petty moldwarp hole, saving always the little slices of bacon. Now, if the dice will not favor you with any other throw but ambs ace and the chance of 3 at the great end, mark well the ace, then take me your dame, settle her in a corner of the bed, and whisk me her up drill-a-trill, there, turalura-la-la. Which when you have done, take a hearty draught of the best, dispicando grenovilibus in despite of the frogs, whose fair coarse babuskine stockings shall be set apart for the little green geese or mewed goslings, which, fattened in a coop, take delight to sport themselves at the wagtail game, waiting for the beating of the metal and heating of the wax by the slavering drivellers of consolation. Very true it is, that the 4 oxen which are in debate, and whereof mention was made, were somewhat short in memory. Nevertheless, to understand the game aright, they feared neither the cormorant nor mallard of Savoy, which put the good people of my country in great hope that their children sometime should become very skillful in algorism. Therefore is it, that by a law rubric and special sentence thereof, that we cannot fail to take the wolf if we make our hedges higher than the windmill, whereof somewhat was spoken by the plaintiff. But the great devil did envy it, and by that means put the high dutches far behind, who played the devils in swilling down and tippling at the good liquor, trink, main hair, trink, trink. By two of my tablemen in the corner point I have gained the lurch. For it is not probable, nor is there any appearance of truth in this saying, that at Paris upon a little bridge the hen is proportionable. And were they as copped and high-crested as marsh whoops, if veritably they did not sacrifice the printer's pumpet balls at Morb, with a new edge set upon them by text letters or those of a swift-writing hand, it is all one to me, so that the headband of the book breed not moths or worms in it. And put the case that, at the coupling together of the buckhounds, the little puppies shall have waxed proud before the notary could have given an account of the serving of his writ by the cabalistic art, it will necessarily follow, under correction of the better judgment of the court, that 6 acres of meadow ground of the greatest breadth will make 3 butts of fine ink without paying ready money. Considering that, at the funeral of King Charles, we might have had the fathom in open market for 1 and 2, that is, deuce ace. This I may affirm with a safe conscience, upon my oath of wool. And I see ordinarily in all good bagpipes, that, when they go to the counterfeiting of the chirping of small birds, by swinging a broom 3 times about a chimney, and putting his name upon record, they do nothing but bend a crossbow backwards and wind a horn, if perhaps it be too hot. And that, by making it fast to a rope he was to draw, immediately after the sight of the letters, the cows were restored to him. Such another sentence, after the homeliest manner, was pronounced in the 17th year, because of the bad government of Lucifaugeraus, whereunto it may please the court to have regard. I desire to be rightly understood. For truly, I say not but that in all equity, and with an upright conscience, those may very well be dispossessed who drink holy water as one would do a weaver's shuttle, whereof suppositories are made to those that will not resign, but on the terms of L and tell, and giving of one thing for another. Tunc, my lords, quid juris pro minoribus? For the common custom of the Salic law is such, that the first incendiary or firebrand of sedition that flays the cow, and wipes his nose in a full concert of music without blowing in the cobbler's stitches, should in the time of the nightmare sublimate the penury of his member by moss gathered when people are like to founder themselves at the mess at midnight, to give the estrapade to these white wines of Anjou that do the fear of the leg in lifting it by horsemen called the gambetta. And that neck to neck after the fashion of Brittany, concluding as before with costs, damages, and interests. After that the Lord of Suckfist had ended, Pantagruel said to the Lord of Kissbreech, my friend, have you a mind to make any reply to what is said? No, my lord, answered Kissbreech, for I have spoke all I intended, and nothing but the truth. Therefore, put an end for God's sake to our difference, for we are here at great charge. Chapter 2.13. How Pantagruel gave judgment upon the difference of the 2 lords. Then Pantagruel, rising up, assembled all the presidents, councillors, and doctors that were there, and said unto them, Come now, my masters, you have heard vivi vocis oraculo, the controversy that is in question. What do you think of it? They answered him, We have indeed heard it, but have not understood the devil so much as one circumstance of the case. And therefore we beseech you, una voce, and in courtesy request you that you would give sentence as you think good, and ex nunc prout ex tunc, we are satisfied with it, and do ratify it with our full consents. Well, my masters, said Pantagruel, seeing you are so pleased, I will do it. But I do not truly find the case so difficult as you make it. Your paragraph caton, the law frater, the law gallus, the law quinque pedum, the law vinum, the law si dominus, the law mater, the law mulier bona, to the law sequis, the law pomponius, the law fundi, the law imptor, the law praetor, the law venditor, and a great many others, are far more intricate in my opinion. After he had spoke this, he walked a turn or 2 about the hall, plodding very profoundly, as one may think. For he did groan like an ass whilst they girth him too hard, with the very intensiveness of considering how he was bound in conscience to do right to both parties, without varying or accepting of persons. Then he returned, sat down, and began to pronounce sentence as followeth. Having seen, heard, calculated, and well considered of the difference between the lords of Kissbreech and Suckfist, the court saith unto them, that in regard of the sudden quaking, shivering, and hoariness of the flickermouse, bravely declining from the estival solstice, to attempt by private means the surprisal of toyish trifles in those who are a little unwell for having taken a draught too much. Through the lewd demeanor and vexation of the beetles that inhabit the dire climate of an hypocritical ape on horseback, bending a crossbow backwards, the plaintiff truly had just cause to calf it, or with oakum to stop the chinks of the galleon which the good woman blew up with wind, having one foot shod and the other bare, reimbursing and restoring to him, low and stiff in his conscience, as many bladdernuts and wild pistaches as there is of hair in 18 cows. With as much for the embroiderer, and so much for that. He is likewise declared innocent of the case privileged from the Napterdes into the danger whereof it was thought he had incurred. Because he could not jocundly, and with fullness of freedom untruss and dung, by the decision of a pair of gloves perfumed with the scent of bum gunshot at the walnut tree taper, as is usual in his country of Rabelais. Slacking, therefore, the topsail and letting go the bowline with the brazen bullets, wherewith the mariners did by way of protestation bake in pastameat great store of pulse interquilted with the dormouse, whose hawk's bells were made with a puntinaria, after the manner of Hungary or Flanders lace, and which his brother-in-law carried in a pannier, lying near to 3 chevrons or bordered gules, whilst he was clean out of heart, drooping and crestfallen by the too narrow sifting, canvassing, and curious examining of the matter in the angularly dog-hole of nasty scoundrels, from whence we shoot at the vermiformal popinjay with the flap made of a foxtail. But in that he chargeth the defendant that he was a botcher, cheese-eater, and trimmer of man's flesh embalmed, which in the arsiversy swagfall tumble was not found true, as by the defendant was very well discussed. The court, therefore, doth condemn and immerse him in 3 porringers of curds, well cemented and closed together, shining like pearls, and codpieced after the fashion of the country, to be paid unto the said defendant about the middle of August in May. But on the other part, the defendant shall be bound to furnish him with hay and stubble for stopping the caltrops of his throat, troubled and impulrigaphized, with gabardines garbled shufflingly, and friends as before, without costs and for cause. Which sentence being pronounced, the 2 parties departed both contented with the decree, which was a thing almost incredible. For it never came to pass since the great reign, nor shall the like occur in 13 jubilees hereafter, that 2 parties contradictorily contending in judgment be equally satisfied and well pleased with the definitive sentence. As for the counselors and other doctors in the law that were there present, they were all so ravished with admiration at the more than human wisdom of Pantagruel, which they did most clearly perceive to be in him by his so accurate decision of this so difficult and thorny cause, that their spirits with the extremity of the rapture being elevated above the pitch of actuating the organs of the body, they fell into a trance and sudden ecstasy, wherein they stayed for the space of 3 long hours, and had been so as yet in that condition, had not some good people fetched store of vinegar and rosewater to bring them again unto their former sense and understanding, for the which God be praised everywhere. And so be it. Chapter 2.14. How Panurge related the manner how he escaped out of the hands of the Turks. The great wit and judgment of Pantagruel was immediately after this made known unto all the world by setting forth his praises in print, and putting upon record this late wonderful proof he hath given thereof amongst the rolls of the crown and registers of the palace, in such sort that everybody began to say that Solomon, who by a probable guess only, without any further certainty, caused the child to be delivered to its own mother, showed never in his time such a masterpiece of wisdom as the good Pantagruel hath done. Happy are we, therefore, that have him in our country. And indeed, they would have made him thereupon master of the requests and president in the court, but he refused all, very graciously thanking them for their offer. For, said he, there is too much slavery in these offices, and very hardly can they be saved that do exercise them, considering the great corruption that is amongst men. Which makes me believe, if the empty seats of angels be not filled with other kind of people than those, we shall not have the final judgment these 7,067 jubilees yet to come, and so Cusanus will be deceived in his conjecture. Remember that I have told you of it, and given you fair advertisement in time and place convenient. But if you have any hogsheads of good wine, I willingly will accept of a present of that. Which they very heartily did do, in sending him of the best that was in the city, and he drank reasonably well, but poor Panurge bibbed and boused of it most villainously. For he was as dry as a red herring, as lean as a rake, and, like a poor, lank, slender cat, walked gingerly as if he had trod upon eggs. So that by someone being admonished, in the midst of his draught of a large deep bowl full of excellent claret, with these words fair and softly, "Gossip, you suck up as if you were mad, I give thee to the devil," said he. "Thou hast not found here thy little tippling sippers of Paris, that drink no more than the little bird called a spink or chaffinch, and never take in their beakful of liquor till they be bobbed on the tails after the manner of the sparrows. O companion, if I could mount up as well as I can get down, I had been long ere this above the sphere of the moon with Empedocles. But I cannot tell what a devil this means. This wine is so good and delicious, that the more I drink thereof the more I am athirst. I believe that the shadow of my master Pantagruel engendereth the altered and thirsty men, as the moon doth the catarrhs and defluxions." At which word the company began to laugh, which Pantagruel perceiving, said, "Panurge, what is that which moves you to laugh so?" "Sir," said he, "I was telling them that these devilish Turks are very unhappy in that they never drink one drop of wine, and that though there were no other harm in all Mahomet's Alcoran, yet for this one base point of abstinence from wine which therein is commanded, I would not submit myself unto their law." "But now tell me," said Pantagruel, "how you escaped out of their hands." "By G, sir," said Panurge, "I will not lie to you in one word. The rascally Turks had broached me upon a spit, all larded like a rabbit, for I was so dry and meagre that otherwise of my flesh they would have made but very bad meat, and in this manner began to roast me alive. As they were thus roasting me, I recommended myself unto the divine grace, having in my mind the good Saint Lawrence, and always hoped in God that he would deliver me out of this torment. Which came to pass, and that very strangely. For as I did commit myself with all my heart unto God, crying, Lord God, help me. Lord God, save me. Lord God, take me out of this pain and hellish torture, wherein these traitorous dogs detain me for my sincerity in the maintenance of thy law. The roaster or turnspit fell asleep by the divine will, or else by the virtue of some good Mercury, who cunningly brought Argus into a sleep for all his 100 eyes. When I saw that he did no longer turn me in roasting, I looked upon him, and perceived that he was fast asleep. Then took I up in my teeth a firebrand by the end where it was not burnt, and cast it into the lap of my roaster. And another did I throw, as well as I could, under a field couch that was placed near to the chimney, wherein was the straw bed of my master turnspit. Presently the fire took hold in the straw, and from the straw to the bed, and from the bed to the loft, which was planked and sealed with fir, after the fashion of the foot of a lamp. But the best was, that the fire which I had cast into the lap of my paltry roaster burnt all his groin, and was beginning to seize upon his cullions, when he became sensible of the danger. For his smelling was not so bad but that he felt it sooner than he could have seen daylight. Then suddenly getting up, and in a great amazement running to the window, he cried out to the streets as high as he could, Dal Baroth, Dal Baroth, Dal Baroth, which is as much to say as fire, fire, fire. Incontinently turning about, he came straight towards me to throw me quite into the fire, and to that effect had already cut the ropes wherewith my hands were tied, and was undoing the cords from off my feet, when the master of the house, hearing him cry fire, and smelling the smoke from the very street where he was walking with some other bashaws and mustaphas, ran with all the speed he had to save what he could, and to carry away his jewels. Yet such was his rage, before he could well resolve how to go about it, that he caught the brooch whereon I was spitted, and therewith killed my roaster stark dead, of which wound he died there for want of government or otherwise. For he ran him in with the spit a little above the navel, towards the right flank, till he pierced the third lappet of his liver, and the blow slanting upwards from the midriff or diaphragm, through which it had made penetration, the spit passed athwart the pericardium or capsule of his heart, and came out above at his shoulders, betwixt the spondyles or turning joints of the chine of the back and the left homoplat, which we call the shoulder blade. True it is, for I will not lie, that, in drawing the spit out of my body, I fell to the ground near unto the andirons, and so by the fall took some hurt, which indeed had been greater, but that the lardons or little slices of bacon wherewith I was stuck kept off the blow. My bashaw then seeing the case to be desperate, his house burnt without remission, and all his goods lost, gave himself over unto all the devils in hell, calling upon some of them by their names, Grilgoth, Astaroth, Rapalis, and Gribwilis, 9 several times. Which when I saw, I had above 6 worth of fear, dreading that the devils would come even then to carry away this fool, and seeing me so near him, would perhaps snatch me up too. I am already, thought I, half roasted, and my lardons will be the cause of my mischief. For these devils are very liquorous of lardons, according to the authority which you have of the philosopher Jamblichus, and murmalt, in the Apology of Bossudes, adulterated pro magistros nostros. But for my better security I made the sign of the cross, crying, Hagios, Athanatos, Ho Theos, and none came. At which my rogue bashaw, being very much aggrieved, would, in transpiercing his heart with my spit, have killed himself, and to that purpose had set it against his breast, but it could not enter, because it was not sharp enough. Whereupon I, perceiving that he was not like to work upon his body the effect which he intended, although he did not spare all the force he had to thrust it forward, came up to him and said, Master Bugrino, thou dost here but trifle away thy time, or rashly lose it, for thou wilt never kill thyself thus as thou doest. Well, thou mayst hurt or bruise somewhat within thee, so as to make thee languish all thy lifetime most pitifully amongst the hands of the chirurgeons. But if thou wilt be counselled by me, I will kill thee clear outright, so that thou shalt not so much as feel it, and trust me, for I have killed a great many others, who have found themselves very well after it. Ha, my friend, said he, I prithee do so, and for thy pains I will give thee my codpiece budget. Take, here it is, there are 600 seraphs in it, and some fine diamonds and most excellent rubies. And where are they? Said Epistemon. By St. John, said Panurge, they are a good way hence, if they always keep going. But where is the last year's snow? This was the greatest care that villain the Parisian poet took. Make an end, said Pantagruel, that we may know how thou didst dress thy bashaw. By the faith of an honest man, said Panurge, I do not lie in one word. I swaddled him in a scurvy swathole binding which I found lying there half burnt, and with my cords tied him roister-like both hand and foot, in such sort that he was not able to wince. Then passed my spit through his throat, and hanged him thereon, fastening the end thereof at 2 great hooks or cramperns, upon which they did hang their halberds. And then, kindling a fair fire under him, did flame you up my mylert, as they used to do dry herrings in a chimney. With this, taking his budget, and a little javelin that was upon the foresaid hooks, I ran away a fair galliprake, and God he knows how I did smell my shoulder of mutton. When I was come down into the street, I found everybody come to put out the fire with store of water, and seeing me so half-roasted, they did naturally pity my case, and threw all their water upon me, which, by a most joyful refreshing of me, did me very much good. Then did they present me with some victuals, but I could not eat much, because they gave me nothing to drink but water after their fashion. Other hurt they did me none, only one little villainous turkey knob-breasted rogue came thieftiously to snatch away some of my lardons. But I gave him such a sturdy thump, and sound rap on the fingers with all the weight of my javelin, that he came no more the second time. Shortly after this there came towards me a pretty young Corinthian wench, who brought me a box full of conserves, of round Myraballan plums, called imblix, and looked upon my poor Robin with an eye of great compassion, as it was flea-bitten and pinked with the sparkles of the fire from whence it came, for it reached no farther in length, believe me, than my knees. But note that this roasting cured me entirely of a sciatica, whereunto I had been subject above 7 years before, upon that side which my roaster by falling asleep suffered to be burnt. Now, whilst they were thus busy about me, the fire triumphed, never ask how. For it took hold on above 2,000 houses, which one of them espying cried out, saying, By Mahum's belly, all the city is on fire, and we do nevertheless stand gazing here, without offering to make any relief. Upon this everyone ran to save his own. For my part, I took my way towards the gate. When I was got upon the nap of a little hillock not far off, I turned me about as did Lot's wife, and, looking back, saw all the city burning in a fair fire, whereat I was so glad that I had almost beshit myself for joy. But God punished me well for it. How? Said Pantagruel. Thus, said Panurge, for when with pleasure I beheld this jolly fire, jesting with myself, and saying ha. Poor flies, ha! Poor mice, you will have a bad winter of it this year. The fire is in your reeks, it is in your bedstraw outcome more than 6, yea, more than 1,311 dogs, great and small, altogether out of the town, flying away from the fire. At the first approach, they ran all upon me, being carried on by the scent of my lecherous half-roasted flesh, and had even then devoured me in a trice, if my good angel had not well inspired me with the instruction of a remedy very sovereign against the toothache. And wherefore, said Pantagruel, wert thou afraid of the toothache or pain of the teeth? Wert thou not cured of thy rheums? By Palm Sunday, said Panurge, is there any greater pain of the teeth than when the dogs have you by the legs? But on a sudden, as my good angel directed me, I thought upon my lardons, and threw them into the midst of the field amongst them. Then did the dogs run, and fight with one another at fair teeth which should have the lardons. By this means they left me, and I left them also bustling with and harrying one another. Thus did I escape frolic and lively, gramercy roast meat and cookery. Chapter 2.15 How Panurge showed a very new way to build the walls of Paris. Pantagruel one day, to refresh himself of his study, went a-walking towards St. Marcel's suburbs, to see the extravagancy of the Gobelin building, and to taste of their spiced bread. Panurge was with him, having always a flagon under his gown and a good slice of a gammon of bacon. For without this he never went, saying that it was as a yeoman of the guard to him, to preserve his body from harm. Other sword carried he none, and when Pantagruel would have given him one, he answered that he needed none, for that it would but heat his milt. Yea, but, said Epistemon, if thou shouldst be set upon, how wouldst thou defend thyself? With great buskinades or broadkin blows, answered he, provided thrusts were forbidden. At their return, Panurge considered the walls of the city of Paris, and in derision said to Pantagruel, see what fair walls here are. Oh, how strong they are, and well fitted to keep geese in a mew or coop to fatten them. By my beard, they are competently scurvy for such a city as this is, for a cow with one fart would go near to overthrow above 6 fathoms of them. O my friend, said Pantagruel, dost thou know what Agesilaus said when he was asked why the great city of Lacedaemon was not enclosed with walls? Lo here, said he, the walls of the city. In showing them the inhabitants and citizens thereof, so strong, so well armed, and so expert in military discipline, signifying thereby that there is no wall but of bones, and that towns and cities cannot have a surer wall nor better fortification than the prowess and virtue of the citizens and inhabitants. So is this city so strong, by the great number of warlike people that are in it, that they care not for making any other walls. Besides, whosoever would go about to wall it, as Strasbourg, Orleans, or Ferrara, would find it almost impossible, the cost and charges would be so excessive. Yea, but, said Panurge, it is good, nevertheless, to have an outside of stone when we are invaded by our enemies, were it but to ask, who is below there? As for the enormous expense which you say would be needful for undertaking the great work of walling this city about, if the gentlemen of the town will be pleased to give me a good rough cup of wine, I will show them a pretty, strange, and new way, how they may build them good cheap. How? Said Pantagruel. Do not speak of it then, answered Panurge, and I will tell it you. I see that the sine quo nons, calabistris, or contrapunctums of the women of this country are better cheap than stones. Of them should the walls be built, ranging them in good symmetry by the rules of architecture, and placing the largest in the first ranks, then sloping downwards ridgewise, like the back of an ass. The middle-sized ones must be ranked next, and last of all the least and smallest. This done, there must be a fine little interlacing of them, like points of diamonds, as is to be seen in the great tower of Bourgs, with a like number of the nudinudos, nilnesistandos, and stiff brackmards that dwell in amongst the claustral codpieces. What devil were able to overthrow such walls? There is no metal like it to resist blows, in so far that, if culverin shot should come to graze upon it, you would incontinently see distill from thence the blessed fruit of the great pox as small as rain. Beware in the name of the devils, and hold off. Furthermore, no thunderbolt or lightning would fall upon it. For why? They are all either blessed or consecrated. I see but one inconveniency in it. Ho ho ha has high. Said Pantagruel, and what is that? It is that the flies would be so liquorish of them that you would wonder, and would quickly gather there together, and there leave their ordure and excretions, and so all the work would be spoiled. But see how that might be remedied. They must be wiped and made rid of the flies with fair foxtails, or great good videses, which are aspizels of Provence. And to this purpose I will tell you, as we go to supper, a brave example set down by Frater Lubinus, Libro de Computationibus Mendicantium. In the time that the beasts did speak, which is not yet 3 days since, a poor lion, walking through the forest of Bure, and saying his own little private devotions, passed under a tree where there was a roguish collier gotten up to cut down wood, who, seeing the lion, cast his hatchet at him and wounded him enormously in one of his legs. Whereupon the lion halting, he so long twalled and turmoiled himself in roaming up and down the forest to find help, that at last he met with a carpenter, who willingly looked upon his wound, cleansed it as well as he could, and filled it with moss, telling him that he must wipe his wound well that the flies might not do their excrements in it, whilst he should go search for some yarrow or millifoil, commonly called the carpenter's herb. The lion, being thus healed, walked along in the forest at what time a sempiternus crone, an old hag, was picking up and gathering some sticks in the said forest, who, seeing the lion coming towards her, for fear fell down backwards, in such sort that the wind blew up her gown, coats, and smock, even as far as above her shoulders. Which the lion perceiving, for pity ran to see whether she had taken any hurt by the fall, and thereupon considering her, how do you call it, said, O poor woman, who hath thus wounded thee? Which words when he had spoken, he espied a fox, whom he called to come to him, saying, Gossip Reynard, how, hither, hither, and for cause. When the fox was come, he said unto him, My gossip and friend, they have hurt this good woman here between the legs most villainously, and there is a manifest solution of continuity. See how great a wound it is, even from the tail up to the navel, in measure 4, nay full 5 handfuls and a half. This is the blow of a hatchet, I doubt me. It is an old wound, and therefore, that the flies may not get into it, wipe it lustily well and hard, I prithee, both within and without. Thou hast a good tail and long. Wipe, my friend, wipe, I beseech thee, and in the meanwhile I will go get some moss to put into it, for thus ought we to succor and help one another. Wipe it hard thus, my friend, wipe it well, for this wound must be often wiped, otherwise the party cannot be at ease. Go to, wipe well, my little gossip, wipe. God hath furnished thee with a tail, thou hast a long one and of a bigness proportionable, wipe hard and be not weary. A good wiper, who, in wiping continually wipeth with his whippard, by wasps shall never be wounded. Wipe, my pretty minion, wipe, my little bully, I will not stay long. Then went he to get store of moss, and when he was a little way off, he cried out in speaking to the fox thus, Wipe well still, gossip, wipe, and let it never grieve thee to wipe well, my little gossip. I will put thee into service to be wiper to Don Pedro de Castile, wipe, only wipe, and no more. The poor fox wiped as hard as he could, here and there, within and without. But the false old trot did so fizzle and fist that she stunk like 100 devils, which put the poor fox to a great deal of ill ease, for he knew not to what side to turn himself to escape the unsavory perfume of this old woman's postern blasts. And whilst to that effect he was shifting hither and thither, without knowing how to shun the annoyance of those unwholesome gusts, he saw that behind there was yet another hole, not so great as that which he did wipe, out of which came this filthy and infectious air. The lion at last returned, bringing with him of moss more than 18 packs would hold, and began to put into the wound with a staff which he had provided for that purpose, and had already put in full 16 packs and a half, at which he was amazed. What a devil! Said he, this wound is very deep, it would hold above 2 cartloads of moss. The fox, perceiving this, said unto the lion, O gossip lion, my friend, I pray thee do not put in all thy moss there. Keep somewhat, for there is yet here another little hole, that stinks like 500 devils. I am almost choked with the smell thereof, it is so pestiferous and empoisoning. Thus must these walls be kept from the flies, and wages allowed to some for wiping of them. Then said Pantagruel, How dost thou know that the privy parts of women are at such a cheap rate? For in this city there are many virtuous, honest, and chaste women besides the maids. Et ubi prenus? Said Panurge. I will give you my opinion of it, and that upon certain and assured knowledge. I do not brag that I have bombasted 417 since I came into this city, though it be but 9 days ago. But this very morning I met with a good fellow, who, in a wallet such as Aesop's was, carried 2 little girls of 2 or 3 years old at the most, one before and the other behind. He demanded alms of me, but I made him answer that I had more cods than pence. Afterwards I asked him, "Good man, these 2 girls, are they maids?" "Brother," said he, "I have carried them thus these 2 years, and in regard of her that is before, whom I see continually, in my opinion she is a virgin, nevertheless I will not put my finger in the fire for it. As for her that is behind, doubtless I can say nothing." "Indeed," said Pantagruel, "thou art a gentle companion. I will have thee to be apparelled in my livery." And therefore caused him to be clothed most gallantly according to the fashion that then was, only that Panurge would have the codpiece of his breeches 3 foot long, and in shape square, not round. Which was done, and was well worth the seeing. Oftentimes was he wont to say, that the world had not yet known the emolument and utility that is in wearing great codpieces. But time would one day teach it them, as all things have been invented in time. "God keep from hurt," said he, "the good fellow whose long codpiece or braged hath saved his life. God keep from hurt him, whose long braged hath been worth to him in one day 163,009 crowns. God keep from hurt him, who by his long braged hath saved a whole city from dying by famine. And by G, I will make a book of the commodity of long breaks when I shall have more leisure." And indeed, he composed a fair great book with figures, but it is not printed as yet that I know of. Chapter 2.16. Of the qualities and conditions of Panurge. Panurge was of a middle stature, not too high nor too low, and had somewhat an aquiline nose, made like the handle of a razor. He was at that time 35 years old or thereabouts, fine to gild like a leaden dagger, for he was a notable cheater and coney catcher. He was a very gallant and proper man of his person, only that he was a little lecherous, and naturally subject to a kind of disease, which at that time they called lack of money. It is an incomparable grief. Yet, notwithstanding, he had 63 tricks to come by it at his need, of which the most honorable and most ordinary was in manner of thieving. Secret purloining and filching, for he was a wicked lewd rogue, a cozener, drinker, roister, rover, and a very dissolute and debauched fellow, if there were any in Paris. Otherwise, and in all matters else, the best and most virtuous man in the world, and he was still contriving some plot, and devising mischief against the sergeants and the watch. At one time he assembled 3 or 4 especial good hacksters and roaring boys, made them in the evening drink like Templars, afterwards led them till they came under Saint Genevieve, or about the College of Navarre, and at the hour that the watch was coming up that way, which he knew by putting his sword upon the pavement, and his ear by it, and when he heard his sword shake, it was an infallible sign that the watch was near at that instant. Then he and his companions took a tumbrel or dung cart, and gave it the brangle, hurling it with all their force down the hill, and so overthrew all the poor watchmen like pigs, and then ran away upon the other side. For in less than 2 days he knew all the streets, lanes, and turnings in Paris as well as his Deus det. At another time he made in some fair place, where the said watch was to pass, a train of gunpowder, and, at the very instant that they went along, set fire to it, and then made himself sport to see what good grace they had in running away, thinking that St. Anthony's fire had caught them by the legs. As for the poor masters of arts, he did persecute them above all others. When he encountered with any of them upon the street, he would not never fail to put some trick or other upon them, sometimes putting the bit of a fried turd in their graduate hoods, at other times pinning on little foxtails or hare's ears behind them, or some such other roguish prank. One day that they were appointed all to meet in the Fodder Street, Sorbonne, he made a bourbonce tart, or filthy and slovenly compound, made of store of garlic, of asafoetida, of castoreum, of dogs' turds very warm, which he steeped, tempered, and liquefied in the corrupt matter of pocky boils and pestiferous botches. And very early in the morning therewith anointed all the pavement, in such sort that the devil could not have endured it, which made all these good people there to lay up their gorges, and vomit what was upon their stomachs before all the world, as if they had flayed the fox. And 10 or 12 of them died of the plague, 14 became lepers, 18 grew lousy, and about 7 and 20 had the pox, but he did not care a button for it. He commonly carried a whip under his gown, wherewith he whipped without remission the pages whom he found carrying wine to their masters, to make them mend their pace. In his coat he had above 6 and 20 little fobs and pockets always full, one with some lead water, and a little knife as sharp as a glover's needle, wherewith he used to cut purses, another with some kind of bitter stuff, which he threw into the eyes of those he met, another with clotburs, penned with little geese or capon's feathers, which he cast upon the gowns and caps of honest people, and often made them fair horns, which they wore about all the city, sometimes all their life. Very often, also, upon the women's French hoods would he stick in the hind part somewhat made in the shape of a man's member. In another he had a great many little horns full of fleas and lice, which he borrowed from the beggars of Saint Innocent, and cast them with small canes or quills to write with into the necks of the daintiest gentlewomen that he could find, yea, even in the church. For he never seated himself above in the choir, but always sat in the body of the church amongst the women, both at mass, at vespers, and at sermon. In another he used to have good store of hooks and buckles, wherewith he would couple men and women together that sat in company close to one another, but especially those that wore gowns of crimson taffeties, that, when they were about to go away, they might rend all their gowns. In another he had a squib furnished with tinder, matches, stones to strike fire, and all other tackling necessary for it. In another 2 or 3 burning glasses, wherewith he made both men and women sometimes mad, and in the church put them quite out of countenance. For he said that there was but an antistrophe, or little more difference than of a literal inversion, between a woman fall a la messe and mal a la fesse, that is, foolish at the mass and of a pliant buttock. In another he had a good deal of needles and thread, wherewith he did 1,000 little devilish pranks. One time, at the entry of the palace unto the great hall, where a certain grey friar or cordelier was to say mass to the councillors, he did help to apparel him and put on his vestments, but in the accoutring of him he sewed on his alb, surplice, or stole, to his gown and shirt, and then withdrew himself when the said lords of the court or councillors came to hear the said mass. But when it came to the ite, missa est, that the poor frater would have laid by his stole or surplice, as the fashion then was, he plucked off withal both his frock and shirt, which were well sewed together, and thereby stripping himself up to the very shoulders showed his belvedere to all the world, together with his Don Cipriano, which was no small one, as you may imagine. And the friar still kept hailing, but so much the more did he discover himself and lay open his back parts, till one of the lords of the court said, "How now? What's the matter? Will this fair father make us here an offering of his tail to kiss it? Nay, St. Anthony's fire kiss it for us." From thenceforth it was ordained that the poor fathers should never disrobe themselves any more before the world, but in their vestry room, or sextry, as they call it, especially in the presence of women, lest it should tempt them to the sin of longing and disordinate desire. The people then asked why it was the friars had so long and large genitories. The said Panurge resolved the problem very neatly, saying, that which makes asses to have such great ears is that their dams did put no biggins on their heads, as Aliaco mentioneth in his suppositions. By the like reason, that which makes the genitories or generation tools of those so fair fraters so long is, for that they wear no bottomed breeches, and therefore their jolly member, having no impediment, hangeth dangling at liberty as far as it can reach, with a wiggle-waggle down to their knees, as women carry their paternoster beads. And the cause wherefore they have it so correspondently great is, that in this constant wigwagging the humours of the body descend into the said member. For, according to the legists, agitation and continual motion is cause of attraction. Item, he had another pocket full of itching powder, called stone alum, whereof he would cast some into the backs of those women whom he judged to be most beautiful and stately, which did so ticklishly gall them, that some would strip themselves in the open view of the world, and others dance like a cock upon hot embers or a drumstick on a tabor. Others again ran about the streets, and he would run after them. To such as were in the stripping vein, he would very civilly come to offer his attendance, and cover them with his cloak, like a courteous and very gracious man. Item, in another he had a little leather bottle full of old oil, wherewith, When he saw any man or woman in a rich new handsome suit, he would grease, smutch, and spoil all the best parts of it under color and pretense of touching them, saying, "This is good cloth, this is good satin, good taffeties. Madam, God give you all that your noble heart desireth. You have a new suit, pretty sir, and you a new gown, sweet mistress. God give you joy of it, and maintain you in all prosperity." And with this would lay his hand upon their shoulder, at which touch such a villainous spot was left behind, so enormously engraven to perpetuity in the very soul, body, and reputation, that the devil himself could never have taken it away. Then, upon his departing, he would say, "Madam, take heed you do not fall, for there is a filthy great hole before you, whereinto if you put your foot, you will quite spoil yourself." Another he had all full of euphorbium, very finely pulverized. In that powder did he lay a fair handkerchief curiously wrought, which he had stolen from a pretty seamstress of the palace, in taking away a louse from off her bosom which he had put there himself. And, when he came into the company of some good ladies, he would trifle them into a discourse of some fine workmanship of bone lace, then immediately put his hand into their bosom, asking them, "And this work, is it of Flanders or of Hainault?" And then drew out his handkerchief, and said, "Hold, hold, look what work here is. It is of Foutignan or of Fontarabia," and shaking it hard at their nose, made them sneeze for 4 hours without ceasing. In the meanwhile he would fart like a horse, and the women would laugh and say, "How now, do you fart, Panurge?" "No, no, madam," said he, "I do but tune my tail to the plain song of the music which you make with your nose." In another he had a picklock, a pelican, a crampern, a crook, and some other iron tools, wherewith there was no door nor coffer which he would not pick open. He had another full of little cups, wherewith he played very artificially, for he had his fingers made to his hand, like those of Minerva or Arachne, and had heretofore cried treacle. And when he changed a testin, cardicou, or any other piece of money, the changer had been more subtle than a fox if Panurge had not at every time made 5 or 6 sols, that is, some 6 or 7 pence, vanish away invisibly, openly, and manifestly, without making any hurt or lesion, whereof the changer should have felt nothing but the wind. Chapter 2.17 How Panurge gained the pardons, and married the old women, and of the suit in law which he had at Paris. One day I found Panurge very much out of countenance, melancholic, and silent, which made me suspect that he had no money. Whereupon I said unto him, "Panurge, you are sick, as I do very well perceive by your physiognomy, and I know the disease. You have a flux in your purse, but take no care. I have yet 7 pence halfpenny that never saw father nor mother, which shall not be wanting, no more than the pox, in your necessity." Whereunto he answered me, "Well, well, for money one day I shall have but too much, for I have a philosopher's stone which attracts money out of men's purses as the adamant doth iron. But will you go with me to gain the pardons?" Said he. "By my faith," said I am no great pardon taker in this world. If I shall be any such in the other, I cannot tell. Yet let us go, in God's name, it is but 1 farthing more or less. But, said he, "Lend me then a farthing upon interest." "No, no," said I will give it you freely and from my heart." "Greats vobis dominos," said he. So we went along, beginning at St. Gervais, and I got the pardons at the first box only, for in those matters very little contenteth me. Then did I say my small suffrages and the prayers of St. Bridget, but he gained them all at the boxes, and always gave money to every one of the partners. From thence we went to Our Lady's Church, to St. John S., to St. Anthony S., and so to the other churches, where there was a banquet bank of pardons. For my part, I gained no more of them, but he at all the boxes kissed the relics, and gave at every one. To be brief, when we were returned, he brought me to drink at the Castle Tavern, and there showed me 10 or 12 of his little bags full of money, at which I blessed myself, and made the sign of the cross, saying, "Where have you recovered so much money in so little time?" Unto which he answered me, that he had taken it out of the basins of the pardons. For in giving them the first farthing, said he, "Put it in with such sleight of hand, and so dexterously that it appeared to be a 3 pence. Thus with one hand I took 3 pence, 9 pence, or 6 pence at the least, and with the other as much, and so through all the churches where we have been. Yea, but said I, you damn yourself like a snake, and are withal a thief and sacrilegious person." True, said he, in your opinion, but I am not of that mind. For the partners do give me it, when they say unto me in presenting the relics to kiss, centuplum accipes, that is, that for 1 penny I should take 100. For accipes is spoken according to the manner of the Hebrews, who use the future tense instead of the imperative, as you have in the law diliges dominum, that is, dilige. Even so, when the pardon-bearer says to me, centuplum accipes, his meaning is centuplum accipe. And so doth Rabbi Chaimi and Rabbi Aben Ezra expound it, and all the Masoretes et Ibi Bartholus. Moreover, Pope Sixtus gave me 1,500 francs of yearly pension, which in English money is £150, upon his ecclesiastical revenues and treasure, for having cured him of a cankerous botch, which did so torment him that he thought to have been a cripple by it all his life. Thus I do pay myself at my own hand, for otherwise I get nothing upon the said ecclesiastical treasure. Ho, my friend, said he, if thou didst know what advantage I made, and how well I feathered my nest, by the Pope's bull of the crusade, thou wouldst wonder exceedingly. It was worth to me above 6,000 florins, in English coin £600. And what a devil is become of them? Said I, for of that money thou hast not 1 halfpenny. They returned from whence they came, said he, they did no more but change their master. But I employed at least 3,000 of them, that is, £300 English, in marrying not young virgins, for they find but too many husbands but great old sempiternus trots, which had not so much as 1 tooth in their heads. And that out of the consideration I had that these good old women had very well spent the time of their youth in playing at the close buttock game to all comers, serving the foremost first, till no man would have any more dealing with them. And by G, I will have their skin coat shaken once yet before they die. By this means, to one I gave 100 florins, to another 60, to another 300, according to that they were infamous, detestable, and abominable. For by how much the more horrible and execrable they were, so much the more must I needs have given them, otherwise the devil would not have jumped them. Presently I went to some great and fat wood porter, or such like, and did myself make the match. But before I did show him the old hags, I made a fair muster to him of the crowns, saying, Good fellow, see what I will give thee if thou wilt, but condescend to duffle, dinferdale, or lecher it one good time. Then began the poor rogues to gape like old mules, and I caused to be provided for them a banquet, with drink of the best and store of spiceries, to put the old women in rut and heat of lust. To be short, they occupied all, like good souls. Only, to those that were horribly ugly and ill-favored, I caused their head to be put within a bag, to hide their face. Besides all this, I have lost a great deal in suits of law. And what lawsuits couldst thou have? Said I, thou hast neither house nor lands. My friend, said he, the gentlewomen of this city had found out, by the instigation of the devil of hell, a manner of high-mounted bands and neckerchiefs for women, which did so closely cover their bosoms that men could no more put their hands under. For they had put the slit behind, and those neckcloths were wholly shut before, whereat the poor sad contemplative lovers were much discontented. Upon a fair Tuesday I presented a petition to the court, making myself a party against the said gentlewomen, and showing the great interest that I pretended therein, protesting that by the same reason I would cause the codpiece of my breeches to be sewed behind, if the court would not take order for it. In sum, the gentlewomen put in their defenses, showing the grounds they went upon, and constituted their attorney for the prosecuting of the cause. But I pursued them so vigorously, that by a sentence of the court it was decreed those high neckcloths should be no longer worn if they were not a little cleft and open before. But it cost me a good sum of money. I had another very filthy and beastly process against the dung farmer called Master Fiffy and his deputies, that they should no more read privily the pipe, puncheon, nor court of sentences, but in fair full day, and that in the fodder schools, in face of the Arian artisan sophisters, where I was ordained to pay the charges, by reason of some clause mistaken in the relation of the sergeant. Another time I framed a complaint to the court against the mules of the presidents, councillors, and others, tending to this purpose, that, when in the lower court of the palace they left them to champ on their bridles, some bibs were made for them, by the councillors' wives, that with their drivelling they might not spoil the pavement, to the end that the pages of the palace what play upon it with their dice, or at the game of coxbody, at their own ease, without spoiling their breeches at the knees. And for this I had a fair decree, but it cost me dear. Now reckon up what expense I was at in little banquets, which from day to day I made to the pages of the palace. And to what end? Said I. My friend, said he, thou hast no pastime at all in this world. I have more than the king, and if thou wilt join thyself with me, we will do the devil together. No, no, said I, by Saint Adoras, that will I not, for thou wilt be hanged one time or another. And thou, said he, wilt be interred some time or other. Now which is most honorable, the air or the earth? Ho, gross peccor! Whilst the pages are at their banqueting, I keep their mules, and to someone I cut the stirrup-leather of the mounting side till it hang but by a thin strap or thread, that when the great puff-guts of the counsellor or some other hath taken his swing to get up, he may fall flat on his side like a pork, and so furnish the spectators with more than 100 francs worth of laughter. But I laugh yet further to think how at his homecoming the master-page is to be whipped like green rye, which makes me not to repent what I have bestowed in feasting them. In brief, he had, as I said before, 63 ways to acquire money, but he had 214 to spend it, besides his drinking.